Toddler dropped Teddy Bear off. Cliff, the real bear who returned it, became a legend. Let us know where you're watching from. If you love my content, consider supporting it with a super thanks. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe. It'll help us to remain in touch with amazing people like you. The morning air was crisp and clean as the Harrison family made their way along the narrow mountain trail. 4-year-old Sophie clutched her beloved teddy bear, Mr. Buttons, as she toddled behind her parents, Oliver and Emma. The sunlight filtered through the tall pines, casting dappled shadows across the path. Sophie's tiny fingers gripped the worn fur of Mr. Buttons tightly. He had been her constant companion since birth, his once bright brown fur now faded from years of hugs and tears. "Look, Sophie, can you see the valley below?" Oliver pointed to the breathtaking view beside them. The trail they walked hugged the edge of a steep cliff that plunged hundreds of feet down into a misty valley. Wild flowers dotted the rocky edges, their purple and yellow blossoms swaying in the gentle breeze. Sophie inched closer to the edge, her wide blue eyes taking in the magnificent scene. Mr. Buttons dangled from her hand as she peered over. "Be careful, sweetie," Emma called, reaching for her daughter's hand. "Stay away from the edge." But Sophie was enchanted by a butterfly that had landed on a nearby rock. Its wings were vibrant blue, almost glowing in the morning sun. She let go of her mother's hand and reached out toward the delicate creature. "Butterfly!" she cried with delight. The butterfly fluttered up suddenly, startling the little girl. She stumbled backward, her small feet catching on a loose rock. As she regained her balance, Mr. Buttons slipped from her grasp. Time seemed to slow as the teddy bear tumbled over the cliff's edge, bouncing against rocks before disappearing into the misty abyss below. Sophie's face froze in shock before crumpling into despair. Her wail echoed across the mountains, a sound of pure heartbreak that seemed to touch the very sky above them. "Mr. Buttons!" she screamed, her small hands reaching desperately toward the cliff edge. "Mr. Buttons!" Oliver grabbed his daughter before she could get too close to the dangerous drop. He held her tight as she sobbed uncontrollably, her tiny body shaking with grief. "We'll get you a new teddy, sweetheart." Emma tried to console her, stroking Sophie's blonde curls. "An even better one." But Sophie shook her head violently. "No, I want Mr. Buttons. He's scared down there all alone." Oliver and Emma exchanged helpless glances. The cliff was far too steep and dangerous to attempt a rescue mission for a stuffed toy, no matter how precious that toy might be. "He's gone, honey," Oliver said gently. "I'm so sorry." Sophie's cries grew louder, her pain raw and unfiltered as only a child's can be. Her sobs carried through the forest, echoing among the ancient trees. Deep within those trees, something stirred. A massive form shifted in the shadows, ears perking up at the sound of distress. Curious amber eyes peered through the foliage at the scene unfolding on the trail. A large black bear, its coat gleaming in patches of sunlight, watched the little family. It tilted its head slightly as if trying to understand the source of such profound sorrow. The bear had been foraging peacefully before the child's cries disturbed the morning quiet. Unlike most of its kind who would retreat further into the forest at the sound of humans, this bear moved closer, drawn by something it couldn't understand, the pure, honest grief of a child. As the Harrison family tried to continue their hike, Sophie's steps dragged. Her sobs had quieted to hiccuping whimpers, but her eyes never left the cliff edge where Mr. Buttons had vanished. Each step she took away from the spot seemed to physically pain her. Meanwhile, the bear moved silently through the underbrush, powerful muscles carrying it effortlessly across the forest floor. It approached the cliff edge at a different point, nose twitching as it caught an unfamiliar scent, artificial fur, and the lingering fragrance of a child's embrace. The bear peered over the edge, its keen eyes spotting something small and brown wedged between rocks far below. Something that didn't belong to the natural landscape. Something that smelled of human child and carried the weight of love in its stuffing. Without hesitation, the bear began to make its way down the treacherous cliff face, massive paws finding secure holds where no human could safely step. Rocks occasionally tumbled beneath its weight, disappearing into the mist below, but the bear moved with surprising grace for its size. Its mission, incomprehensible to any observer, drove it forward, down toward the small lost object that had caused such heartbreak above. And as the day grew warmer and the mist began to clear from the valley, the legend of the cliff bear was about to be born. "Maybe we should turn back," Emma suggested softly, her heart aching as she watched Sophie trudging along the trail, shoulders slumped in defeat. The little girl who had been skipping and chattering excitedly just an hour earlier now moved as if carrying a great weight. "This hike doesn't feel right anymore." Oliver nodded, running his hand through his hair in frustration. "I know. But the ranger station is closer if we go forward. Maybe they'll have a gift shop with a teddy bear." He lowered his voice. "It won't be the same, but it won't work," Emma whispered back. "Mr. Buttons was a gift from my mother before she passed. Sophie has slept with him every night for 4 years. He's irreplaceable." The revelation hung heavy in the air between them. Now, the loss of the teddy bear carried an even deeper significance, a connection to a grandmother Sophie barely remembered, but whose love remained present through the well-worn toy. Sophie stopped suddenly in the middle of the path, her tear-streaked face turning back toward where they had come from. "Mr. Buttons is calling me," she said, with the absolute certainty that only children possess. "He's scared, Mommy. He wants to come home. Honey, I know it hurts." Oliver knelt beside his daughter, his own eyes glistening with empathy. "But sometimes we lose things we love, and we have to say goodbye." "No!" Sophie stamped her foot, her grief transforming momentarily into determination. "He's not gone forever. I can feel him." A family of hikers approached from the opposite direction, a middle-aged couple with their teenage son. The woman slowed as she noticed Sophie's distress. "Is everything okay?" she asked gently. Emma explained the situation while Oliver tried to coax Sophie to continue walking. The teenage boy, who had been trailing behind his parents with the typical indifference of adolescence, suddenly perked up. "I could try to get it," he offered, peering over the cliff edge. "I do rock climbing at school." "Absolutely not," his father said firmly. "That's a 300-foot drop at least. No teddy bear is worth risking your life." The boy's mother nodded in agreement. "It's far too dangerous. I'm so sorry about your daughter's teddy, but please don't let anyone attempt to retrieve it." As the families parted ways, Sophie's renewed hope crumbled once more. Her small body sagged with disappointment, and she wordlessly took her father's hand as they continued along the trail. What none of them knew was that at that very moment, the massive black bear had made it halfway down the treacherous cliff face. Its powerful muscles worked tirelessly as it navigated the nearly vertical terrain with surprising agility. Small avalanches of pebbles and dirt cascaded below with each careful step, but the bear remained focused on its inexplicable mission. Further along the trail, another unexpected encounter awaited the Harrison family. An old man sat on a fallen log beside the path, his weathered face crinkled into a smile as he carved a piece of wood with a small knife. A worn backpack rested at his feet, and a walking stick fashioned from a gnarled branch leaned against the log beside him. "Beautiful day for a hike," he greeted them, his voice as rough and warm as tree bark. Then his smile faded as he noticed Sophie's red-rimmed eyes and trembling lip. Now, what's troubling this little mountaineer? She lost her teddy bear over the cliff back there, Oliver explained, gesturing vaguely behind them. It was very special to her. The old man's eyes widened slightly. He set down his carving and leaned forward. Over Whispering Cliff? When Oliver nodded, the old man glanced at Sophie with newfound interest. That's what the locals call it, Whispering Cliff, named for the strange sounds that come from it sometimes, like the mountain itself is trying to speak. Sophie looked up, momentarily distracted from her misery. What kind of sounds? Oh, all sorts, the old man said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. Whistling, winds that form words if you listen closely. Animal calls that don't match any known creature. And sometimes, he paused dramatically, sometimes the mountain helps those who have pure hearts. Emma shot Oliver a warning look. The last thing they needed was to give Sophie false hope. But the old man continued. I've been hiking these trails for 60 years, seen things most folks wouldn't believe. They call me Old Walter around these parts. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a smooth black stone, offering it to Sophie. This is a wishing stone from the heart of the mountain. Hold it tight, make your wish, and leave it on the Rainbow Falls lookout point about a mile ahead. The mountain hears all wishes made there. Sophie accepted the stone, cradling it in her palm with reverence. Can I wish for Mr. Buttons to come back? You can wish for whatever your heart desires, little one, Old Walter said kindly. But remember, the mountain answers in its own way, not always the way we expect. As they thanked the old man and continued their journey, Emma whispered to Oliver, "That was sweet of him," giving her something else to focus on. Oliver nodded, but his expression was thoughtful. Did you notice anything odd about him? No water bottle, no proper hiking gear, just that small pack for what must be a long trail. Emma shrugged. Probably a local who knows these mountains like the back of his hand. Some of these old-timers don't need all the fancy equipment we city folks rely on. Little did they know that by the time they'd met Old Walter, the bear had reached the bottom of the cliff. Its keen nose led it directly to Mr. Buttons, who lay wedged between two rocks, one arm dangling precariously over a small stream that rushed below. The teddy bear's once cheerful face now seemed to wear an expression of forlorn abandonment, his glass eyes reflecting the scattered light that penetrated the valley floor. The bear approached cautiously, sniffing the foreign object with intense curiosity. Human scent clung to the toy, the sweet, innocent smell of child mixed with traces of laundry soap and home. Something about this scent triggered a memory deep within the bear's consciousness. Long ago, before it had grown to its impressive size, when it was a small cub lost and afraid in a forest fire. The bear had been separated from its mother during the chaos of the blaze. Terrified and choking on smoke, it had stumbled into a clearing where firefighters were battling the inferno. One of them had scooped up the cub, wrapping it in a blanket and carrying it to safety. For 3 days, the bear cub had been cared for by humans before being released back into the wild, when no trace of its mother could be found. That human kindness had imprinted on the young bear's mind, creating an unusual lack of fear toward people that had remained as it grew. Now, faced with this odd human object that smelled so strongly of sadness and love, something stirred in the bear's memory. With surprising gentleness, the massive creature picked up Mr. Buttons in its mouth, careful not to puncture the fragile toy with its sharp teeth. Then, with the same determination that had brought it down the cliff, the bear began the arduous climb back up, carrying its precious cargo. At that same moment, Sophie and her parents had reached Rainbow Falls lookout point. A wooden platform extended from the trail, offering a stunning view of a waterfall that tumbled hundreds of feet into the valley below. On sunny days, the mist created a permanent rainbow across the gorge, hence its name. Sophie approached the railing, the black wishing stone clutched tightly in her hand. Her parents stood back, giving her space for this moment of childhood magic, however futile they believed it to be. "Please, Mountain," Sophie whispered, her eyes closed tight with concentration. "Please bring Mr. Buttons back to me. He's scared of the dark and doesn't know the way home. Please help him." A tear slipped down her cheek as she placed the stone carefully on the edge of the platform, just as old Walter had instructed. As if in response to her plea, a distant rumbling sound echoed across the gorge. Emma and Oliver exchanged concerned glances. "Thunder?" Emma questioned, scanning the clear blue sky. Oliver shook his head. "Doesn't sound like it. Maybe rocks falling somewhere?" The rumbling grew louder, and several hikers who had been enjoying the view began to look around nervously. Then someone pointed toward the cliff they had passed earlier. "Look, on the cliff face. Is that a bear?" All heads turned. Gasps of astonishment rippled through the growing crowd as they spotted the massive black bear making its final ascent up the sheer rock wall. But what caused the greatest stir was what appeared to be clutched in its mouth. Something small, brown, and distinctly unnatural. "Mr. Buttons!" Sophie screamed, recognizing her beloved teddy bear even at this distance. "It's Mr. Buttons, Mommy. The mountain heard me." Oliver grabbed Sophie, pulling her back from the railing as panic rippled through the crowd. A wild bear was climbing toward the trail, a bear carrying what looked like a child's toy. Nothing about the situation made sense, and that made it all the more frightening. "We need to get back to the ranger station," Emma said urgently, her face pale. "Now." But Sophie fought against her father's grip. "No, we can't leave. The bear is bringing Mr. Buttons back. The mountain sent him to help." "Sophie, honey, that's not possible." Oliver tried to reason, though his own mind was struggling to process what his eyes were seeing. "Bears they don't retrieve toys for children." "This one is," Sophie insisted with unwavering certainty. "He heard me crying." Several hikers were already retreating rapidly down the trail toward the ranger station, phones out to call for help. Others remained frozen in place, cameras recording the unbelievable scene unfolding before them. The bear had nearly reached the top now. Its powerful muscles rippled beneath its thick fur as it hauled itself over the final ledge, still delicately holding the teddy bear in its mouth. It paused there on all fours, seeming to survey the scene and the humans who stood watching in terrified fascination. Park Ranger Melissa Chen had been alerted by frantic calls about a bear approaching hikers. She arrived breathless, tranquilizer gun in hand, only to stop short at the tableau before her. A massive black bear standing calmly at the cliff's edge, a child's teddy bear dangling from its mouth, and a small blonde girl fighting to break free from her father's protective embrace. "Nobody move," Ranger Chen commanded quietly, raising her tranquilizer gun. "Stay absolutely still." But before she could take aim, Sophie broke free from her father's grasp. In the split second it took for the adults to react, she had darted forward, straight toward the bear. "Sophie, no!" Emma screamed, lunging after her daughter but stumbling on the uneven ground. Time seemed to slow to a crawl. Every adult watched in horror as the small child ran directly toward the massive predator. Ranger Chen couldn't shoot for fear of hitting the child. Oliver sprinted after his daughter but knew he would be too late. The bear, still holding Mr. Buttons, watched the approaching child with inscrutable eyes. As Sophie came to a stop just feet away from the enormous creature, a collective gasp escaped from every adult present. "Thank you for saving Mr. Buttons," Sophie said quietly, holding out her small hand. "He was very scared down there all alone." The bear lowered its massive head, amber eyes fixed on Sophie's small outstretched hand. The onlookers held their breath, many covering their eyes but unable to look away completely. Ranger Chen's finger hovered over the trigger of her tranquilizer gun, muscles tense as she waited for the slightest indication of aggression from the bear. With deliberate gentleness that seemed impossible for such a powerful creature, the bear placed the teddy bear on the ground in front of Sophie. Mr. Buttons looked surprisingly intact despite his adventure, a bit dirty and damp but otherwise whole. The bear then took one step back, creating distance between itself and the child. Sophie beamed with pure joy as she scooped up her beloved teddy bear. "See, Mr. Buttons, I told you we'd find you," she whispered into the toy's ear. Then, to everyone's continued astonishment, she looked up at the bear and said, "My name is Sophie. This is Mr. Buttons. What's your name?" The bear made a soft huffing sound, almost like a gentle greeting. It sat back on its haunches, its posture relaxed and non-threatening. For a creature that could easily kill with a single swipe of its paw, its behavior was extraordinary. Oliver had reached his daughter now, his heart pounding so hard it threatened to burst from his chest. With slow, careful movements, he placed his hands on Sophie's shoulders. "Let's back away very slowly, sweetheart," he whispered, his voice trembling with fear for his child. Nice and easy. But Sophie seemed completely unafraid. "The bear is my friend, Daddy. He brought Mr. Buttons back to me when no one else could." Ranger Chen had edged closer, her tranquilizer gun still raised. "Sir, please get your daughter away from that animal," she said quietly but firmly. "No matter how it's behaving now, it's still a wild predator." Emma had joined them, her face pale with terror and relief. "Sophie, honey, please come with Mommy now," she pleaded. Surprisingly, it was the bear that broke the standoff. As if understanding the human's fear, it turned and began walking calmly toward the forest edge. At the tree line, it paused and looked back, not at the crowd of astonished hikers, but directly at Sophie. Their eyes met across the distance, and something unspoken passed between child and creature. Then the bear disappeared into the dense trees, leaving behind a stunned silence. "Well, I'll be damned," Ranger Chen muttered, lowering her weapon. In 15 years as a park ranger, she had never witnessed anything remotely like what had just occurred. That was impossible. Sophie hugged Mr. Buttons tightly to her chest, burying her face in his familiar fur. "Not impossible," she corrected the ranger with the supreme confidence of a child. "The mountain helped because I wished on the special stone. The old man said it would work." "What old man?" Ranger Chen asked, her brow furrowing in confusion. Oliver explained their encounter with old Walter earlier on the trail. As he described the man, Ranger Chen's expression shifted from puzzlement to something like wonder. "White beard? Carved walking stick? Gives out smooth black stones?" When Oliver nodded, she let out a long breath. "You met Mountain Walter." "You know him?" Emma asked. "Everyone who works in this park knows about him," Ranger Chen replied, her voice hushed with respect. "He's something of a legend around here. The thing is—" She hesitated, looking around at the curious faces of the gathered hikers before continuing. "Walter Reynolds was a guide in these mountains for over 60 years. He knew every trail, every cave, every waterfall. They say he could talk to the wildlife, predict storms before any weather service, find lost hikers when no one else could." "Was?" Oliver caught the past tense immediately. Ranger Chen nodded slowly. "Walter Reynolds died 3 winters ago. Peaceful, in his sleep, at age 93. There's a memorial plaque for him at the visitor center. A chill ran down Emma's spine. That's not possible. We just saw him, spoke to him. He gave Sophie that stone. What stone? The ranger asked. Sophie opened her palm to reveal nothing. The black wishing stone was gone. It was right here, Sophie insisted. I put it on the edge of the lookout, just like he told me to. The adults exchanged uneasy glances. A collective shiver seemed to pass through the group as they contemplated the implications. There are more things in heaven and earth. An elderly hiker quoted softly, leaving the rest of the Shakespeare line unspoken. The moment was broken by the crackle of Ranger Chen's radio. "Chen here," she answered. "Melissa, we've got reports of a bear near the Rainbow Falls lookout," came a male voice. "Hikers say it's approaching people. Do you have eyes on it?" "Situation under control," she replied. "The bear has returned to the forest. No aggressive behavior observed." She deliberately omitted mentioning the teddy bear retrieval. Some things were better explained in person, if they could be explained at all. "Copy that. Are the hikers safe?" "All safe," she confirmed. "I'll file a full report when I return to the station." By now, videos of the extraordinary event were already being uploaded to social media platforms. The bear's cliff descent and ascent, the return of the teddy bear, Sophie's fearless approach, all captured from multiple angles by astonished onlookers. "We should get moving," Ranger Chen advised the crowd. "That bear may not be showing aggression, but it's still best not to linger in the area." As the hikers began to disperse, many stopped to look at Sophie and her rescued teddy bear with expressions ranging from wonder to disbelief. A few asked to take photos with her and Mr. Buttons, which Emma politely declined. Her maternal instincts were on high alert after the danger Sophie had just faced, regardless of the miraculous outcome. "Can you tell us what happened down on the cliff?" A man with a professional-looking camera asked Oliver. "How did the bear get the teddy bear? Why would it bring it back up?" "I have no explanation," Oliver admitted honestly. "It shouldn't have been possible." When they finally began making their way back toward the ranger station, Ranger Chen walked alongside the Harrison family, her curiosity evident. "Your daughter has a special connection with animals?" she asked carefully, watching Sophie skipping ahead of them, happily chattering to her restored teddy bear. Emma shook her head. "Not particularly. We have a cat at home that tolerates her, but there's nothing unusual about their relationship." "And the teddy bear? It has some significance?" "It was a gift from my mother before she passed away," Emma explained. "Sophie was just a baby then. She slept with it every night of her life." Ranger Chen nodded thoughtfully. "There are stories in these mountains. Native legends about guardian spirits taking animal form to protect the innocent or return lost treasures. Most rangers dismiss them as campfire tales, but—" She looked toward Sophie, who was now showing Mr. Buttons a particularly interesting flowering bush. "Sometimes I wonder—" "Do you think—" Oliver began, then stopped himself, shaking his head at the absurdity of what he was about to suggest. "What?" Ranger Chen prompted. "Do you think we really met Walter Reynolds on the trail today? That he somehow guided us to this moment?" The ranger was silent for a long moment before responding. "In 15 years working these mountains, I've never seen Walter myself. But at least once a year we get reports from hikers who describe meeting an old man matching his description. Always in situations where people need help or guidance of some kind." "Ghosts don't exist," Emma stated firmly, though her voice lacked conviction. "Maybe not," Ranger Chen agreed. "But there's something special about these mountains. Ask any ranger who's worked here long enough." As they neared the ranger station, they could see a small crowd had already gathered. News of the bear incident had spread rapidly, and curious visitors were eager for first-hand accounts. To Emma's dismay, she spotted a local news van pulling into the parking lot. "I don't want Sophie subjected to this," she told Oliver. "She's been through enough today." Ranger Chen overheard and nodded in understanding. "There's a back entrance to the station. You can wait in my office until things quiet down." She led them along a side path to a rear door marked Staff Only. Inside, the ranger station was cool and quiet, a welcome respite from the growing commotion outside. Chen's office was small but neat, with wildlife photographs covering one wall and a large topographical map of the park dominating another. "Make yourselves comfortable," she said, gesturing to a small sofa against the wall. "I need to file a report about the incident, but I'll be right back." When she left, Emma collapsed onto the sofa, the adrenaline finally draining from her body. Oliver sat beside her, pulling her close as Sophie explored the office, showing Mr. Buttons the interesting photographs on the wall. "What just happened out there?" Emma whispered. "I keep replaying it in my mind, and none of it makes sense." Oliver shook his head, his arm tightening around her shoulders. "I don't know. By all rights, we should be planning our daughter's funeral right now. She ran straight at a wild bear, Em. A bear that had somehow climbed an impossible cliff to retrieve her teddy bear." He ran his free hand through his hair, a gesture he always made when deeply troubled. "None of it makes sense." "Look, Mommy," Sophie called excitedly from across the room. "It's the bear." Her parents turned to see Sophie pointing at one of the photographs on Ranger Chen's wall. It showed a large black bear standing in a sunlit clearing, its powerful form unmistakable even in the still image. "Honey, there are lots of black bears in these mountains," Emma began gently. "It probably isn't—" "It's him," Sophie insisted with absolute certainty. "I know it is. He has the same eyes." Oliver stood and walked over to examine the photograph more closely. The bear did have distinctive amber eyes that seemed to stare directly into the camera with unusual intelligence. A small plaque beneath the photo read, "Guardian, rescued as cub during Whispering Ridge Fire, 2017. Photographed at Miners Creek, 2023. "Guardian," Oliver read aloud. "That's his name? Whose name?" Ranger Chen asked, returning to the office with a steaming mug of coffee in each hand. She offered them to Oliver and Emma, who accepted gratefully. "The bear in this photo," Oliver explained. "Sophie thinks it's the same one that brought back her teddy bear." Ranger Chen looked at the photograph, her expression thoughtful. "That's Guardian, all right. He's well known to the rangers here. Most black bears avoid human contact at all costs, but Guardian is different. He's never shown aggression toward people, and he's been spotted unusually close to the trails many times." She paused, taking a sip from her own mug. "There's something special about him." "Was he really rescued from a fire?" Emma asked. Chen nodded. "As a tiny cub. One of our firefighters found him huddled under a fallen log, badly singed and barely alive. His mother was nowhere to be found, presumed dead in the blaze. He was rehabilitated at a wildlife center for a few months before being released back into the wild. So, he's had positive experiences with humans," Oliver mused. "Yes, though that doesn't typically translate to the kind of behavior we saw today. Bears don't retrieve objects for humans, no matter how well they were treated in rehabilitation." Ranger Chen's eyes drifted to Sophie, who was now sitting cross-legged on the floor, showing Mr. Buttons the various items she'd found in her pockets during their hike. A pretty leaf, a small pine cone, a colorful pebble. "There's more to this story than we understand," Chen said quietly, "and I have a feeling it centers around your daughter. Before either parent could respond, there was a knock at the office door. A younger ranger poked his head in, his expression a mixture of excitement and disbelief. "Chen, you need to see this. The videos of that bear incident are going viral. 3 million views already and climbing by the minute. CNN is calling for a statement." Chen sighed deeply. "Tell them no comment for now. And keep the media away from this family," she added firmly. The young ranger nodded, then spotted Sophie on the floor. His eyes widened in recognition. "Is that the little girl from the videos? The one who—" "That'll be all, Parker." Chen cut him off with a pointed look. After he left, she turned back to the Harrisons. "I'm afraid this situation is getting complicated. Your daughter's encounter with Guardian is becoming something of a sensation." Emma groaned. "That's exactly what we don't want. Sophie's only 4. She doesn't need this kind of attention." "I understand completely," Chen assured her. "But you should know that what happened today, a wild bear retrieving a child's toy and returning it, that's not just unusual. As far as I know, it's unprecedented. People are fascinated, and they're going to want answers." "Answers we don't have," Oliver said wearily. The ranger nodded in agreement. "My suggestion would be to stay here until evening when the day visitors have left. I can drive you back to your vehicle in my patrol car to avoid the crowd." After that, she hesitated. "Well, it might be wise to avoid social media for a while." Sophie, seemingly oblivious to the adults' concerns, continued to reacquaint herself with Mr. Buttons, telling him about all the adventures he'd had and promising never to drop him again. The teddy bear's glass eyes caught the light from the window, giving him an almost sentient appearance as he sat propped against Sophie's knees, his worn fur dirtier than before but otherwise intact. "Is there something special about this mountain?" Emma asked suddenly, breaking the contemplative silence that had fallen over the adults. "Something, I don't know, mystical." Ranger Chen considered the question carefully before answering. "These mountains have been sacred to the indigenous people of this region for thousands of years. The Niswa tribe called this particular peak the mountain that listens in their language. They believed it had the power to hear the true desires of a person's heart, and sometimes answer them in unexpected ways." "Through bears that retrieved teddy bears?" Oliver asked skeptically. Chen smiled. "The legends speak of guardian spirits that could take animal form to help those in genuine need, especially children." She shrugged. "I'm a ranger, not an anthropologist, but I've worked these mountains long enough to know there are things that happen here that defy conventional explanation." As if on cue, Sophie looked up from her conversation with Mr. Buttons. "The bear told me his name is Guardian," she said matter-of-factly. "He said he remembers when the people that saved him from the fire, and he wanted to help me because I was sad like he was when he lost his mommy." The adults stared at her in stunned silence. "Sophie," Emma said carefully, "when did the bear tell you this?" "When I thanked him for bringing Mr. Buttons back," Sophie replied, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "He didn't use words like we do. He talked in feelings and pictures in my head." She returned to her one-sided conversation with her teddy bear, apparently unaware of the impact her casual revelation had made. Emma and Oliver exchanged alarmed glances. Ranger Chen's expression was unreadable. "Kids have active imaginations," Oliver said weakly. "Of course," Chen agreed, though her tone suggested she wasn't entirely convinced. "If you'll excuse me, I need to check on the situation outside." When she left, Emma moved to sit on the floor beside Sophie. "Honey, did the bear really talk to you? In your head?" Sophie nodded without looking up from Mr. Buttons. "Uh-huh. He said the mountain sent him to help because I made a pure wish. and that the old man in the woods is a friend who helps lost things find their way home. A chill ran down Emma's spine. What else did he tell you? Sophie finally looked up, her blue eyes serious. He said Mr. Buttons wasn't the only thing that was lost. There's something else lost in the mountain that needs to be found. What is it? Oliver asked, joining them on the floor. Sophie shrugged. He didn't say. Just that someone needs to listen to the mountain to hear where it is. She returned to arranging her collected treasures in front of Mr. Buttons as if the conversation were over. Emma and Oliver shared a look of bewilderment mixed with concern. Their practical, logical worldview was being severely tested by the day's events. Outside the office window, the afternoon was waning, shadows lengthening across the ranger station grounds. The crowd had grown larger rather than dispersing, with news vans from 2 more stations joining the first. Curious visitors gathered around the station entrance, many holding up smartphones to record videos or take pictures. Ranger Chen returned looking harried. "I've never seen anything like this," she admitted. "The story is spreading like wildfire. It's not just local news anymore. The national networks have picked it up. Miraculous bear rescues child's teddy is trending on Twitter." "This is a nightmare," Emma groaned. "We came for a quiet family hike, and now we're hiding from news crews." "There's something else," Chen said, her expression grave. "A wildlife biologist from the university has identified Guardian from the videos. He wants to find him and fit him with a tracking collar for study. Says a bear with this level of unusual behavior needs to be monitored." "No!" Sophie cried out suddenly, startling the adults. She had apparently been listening closely to their conversation despite seeming absorbed in play. "They can't put a collar on Guardian. He doesn't like being trapped. It will hurt his memories of the nice humans. Honey, I'm sure the scientists know how to put collars on bears safely," Oliver tried to reassure her. But Sophie was already dissolving into tears, clutching Mr. Buttons tightly to her chest. "They can't find him. They have to leave him alone. He told me he wants to be free." Emma pulled her daughter into a comforting embrace. "Shh, it's okay, sweetie. No one's going to hurt your bear friend." Ranger Chen watched the scene with concern. "Your daughter seems to have formed a powerful attachment to Guardian in a very short time. She believes the bear communicated with her somehow," Oliver explained in a low voice. "Telepathically, I guess. Emma and I don't know what to make of it." Chen nodded slowly. There have been reports from other cultures of people forming psychic bonds with animals. Most scientists dismiss them as folklore or misinterpreted body language, but... She glanced at Sophie, who was whispering intensely to Mr. Buttons through her tears. "Sometimes I wonder if our understanding of animal consciousness is as complete as we think it is." As they spoke, the light outside shifted suddenly. Dark clouds had moved in with surprising speed, casting the ranger station in premature twilight. A low rumble of thunder echoed through the mountains. "That's strange," Chen murmured, moving to the window. There was no storm in the forecast today. The sky had turned an ominous dark gray, almost green at the edges, the kind of sky that experienced mountain dwellers knew to respect. Wind whipped through the trees surrounding the ranger station, bending their tops at alarming angles. "Looks like a big one brewing," Chen observed. "At least it might disperse that crowd." As if on cue, fat raindrops began to pelt the window, quickly intensifying into a downpour. Lightning flashed, followed almost immediately by a crack of thunder that shook the building. The gathered onlookers outside scattered, running for their vehicles or the main entrance of the ranger station. Sophie had stopped crying and was now watching the storm with wide eyes, her face pressed against the window glass. "The mountain is angry," she whispered. "It's just a storm, sweetie," Emma assured her, though something about the sudden violence of the weather made her uneasy. Sophie shook her head firmly. "No, Mommy. The mountain is trying to hide Guardian from the people who want to put a collar on him. And—" She paused, her small face scrunching in concentration as if listening to something only she could hear. "And it's trying to show us where the lost thing is." "What lost thing, honey?" Oliver asked, exchanging a worried glance with Emma. "I don't know yet," Sophie replied, her eyes never leaving the storm outside. "But the mountain says we need to find it soon, before it's too late." The lights in the ranger station flickered once, twice, then went out completely, plunging the building into semi-darkness. Emergency lights clicked on seconds later, casting an eerie glow throughout the office. "Generator will kick in momentarily," Ranger Chen assured them, moving to a cabinet where she extracted a heavy-duty flashlight. Power outages are common during mountain storms. Sure enough, a low hum signaled the backup generator engaging, and the main lights sputtered back to life. Outside, the storm continued to rage with unnatural intensity. Trees bent nearly double in the howling wind, and rain lashed against the windows with such force it sounded like handfuls of gravel being thrown. The office door burst open, and a soaking wet Parker rushed in, water streaming from his uniform. "Chen, we've got trouble," he panted. "Lightning struck near Miners Creek, reports of a wildfire starting." Chen's expression hardened instantly. "Location?" "East Ridge, about 2 miles from the old abandoned mine. Fire crew's been dispatched from town, but with this weather, they'll be delayed," Chen finished grimly. She turned to the Harrisons. "I'm sorry, but I need to coordinate our response. You're welcome to stay here until the storm passes." Sophie tugged urgently at her mother's sleeve. "Mommy, the old mine is where the lost thing is. We have to go there." "Absolutely not," Emma replied firmly. "There's a fire, Sophie. It's dangerous." "But the mountain is showing us the way," Sophie insisted, clutching Mr. Buttons tightly. "The lightning is pointing to where we need to go." Parker glanced at the child curiously. "The old Whispering Ridge mine? That place has been abandoned for decades. Nothing there but collapsed tunnels and bad memories." Chen shot him a warning look, but Sophie was already intrigued. "What bad memories?" she asked. Parker shrugged, seemingly unaware of Chen's silent signals to stop talking. "Mining disaster back in the 1950s. Several miners got trapped when a section collapsed. They recovered most of the bodies, but legend says one miner was never found." "Parker," Chen interrupted sharply. "Command center now. We have a fire to contain." As the young ranger hurried out, she turned to the Harrisons with an apologetic expression. "Please, make yourselves comfortable. There's a small kitchenette down the hall if you need anything. I'll be back as soon as I can." After she left, Oliver sat heavily in one of the office chairs. "This day just keeps getting stranger," he muttered, running a hand over his face. Emma nodded in agreement, but her attention was on Sophie, who had gone back to the window. The little girl stood on tiptoe, whispering to Mr. Buttons while watching the storm with unusual intensity. "What do you think is happening with her?" Emma asked Oliver quietly. "First the bear. Now she thinks the mountain is talking to her about lost things in mines." Oliver shook his head helplessly. "I don't know. Kids her age have vivid imaginations, but this is different." The way she just knew the bear's name was Guardian before Ranger Chen told us. How do we explain that? Their whispered conversation was interrupted by a particularly violent crash of thunder that seemed to shake the very foundation of the building. Sophie turned from the window, her expression unnervingly serious for a 4-year-old. "Guardian is waiting for us at the trailhead," she announced with complete certainty. "He says we need to hurry." Emma exchanged an alarmed glance with Oliver. "Sophie, sweetie, we're not going anywhere in this storm, and especially not to follow a wild bear." "But the lost miner is calling for help," Sophie insisted, her voice rising. "He's been trapped for so long, and now the fire is coming. We have to help him." Oliver knelt beside his daughter, placing his hands gently on her shoulders. "Honey, that mining accident happened over 70 years ago. If someone was trapped, they couldn't possibly be alive now." Sophie's eyes welled with tears of frustration. "Not his body, Daddy, his spirit. He can't rest because his family never knew what happened to him. He has something important he needs to give them." The conviction in her voice was unsettling. This didn't sound like a child's imagination at play. It was as if Sophie truly believed every word she was saying. "How do you know all this?" Emma asked softly. Sophie pointed to Mr. Buttons. "He told me. When Guardian brought him back, he learned all the secrets of the mountain, and now he's telling them to me." Before either parent could formulate a response to this bewildering statement, the office door opened again. This time, it was a middle-aged man in a Park Service uniform adorned with the insignia of the Chief Ranger. His weathered face was grave as he addressed them. "Mr. and Mrs. Harrison, I'm Chief Ranger Donovan. I understand you've had quite an unusual day," he said, his voice carrying the soft drawl of a local. "First, let me assure you that we're doing everything possible to manage today's situations, both the media interest in your daughter's experience and the wildfire that's just started." "Thank you," Oliver said, standing to shake the man's hand. "We appreciate Ranger Chen's help in keeping us away from the cameras." Chief Donovan nodded. "Melissa's one of our best. She's coordinating with the fire crews now." He hesitated, clearly choosing his next words carefully. "She also mentioned that your daughter seems to have formed some kind of connection with the bear we call Guardian." All three adults looked at Sophie, who was now sitting cross-legged on the floor, engaged in what appeared to be an intense, whispered conversation with her teddy bear. "We don't know what to make of it," Emma admitted. "She says the bear communicated with her telepathically, and now she believes her teddy bear is telling her about a lost miner in the old Whispering Ridge mine." Chief Donovan's expression shifted subtly. "The Richardson case," he murmured, almost to himself. "I'm sorry?" Oliver questioned. The chief seemed to debate internally before responding. "Thomas Richardson was the only body never recovered from the 1953 mining disaster. According to the reports, he was in the deepest section when the collapse happened. They searched for weeks, but eventually had to declare him deceased without recovering his remains." He paused, studying Sophie with newfound interest. "How could your daughter know about that?" "A young ranger, Parker, mentioned the disaster, though not the miner's name," Emma explained. "But she was talking about the lost miner before Parker said anything," Oliver added, his brow furrowed in confusion. "She said the mountain was trying to show us where the lost thing was, and then the lightning struck near the mine." Chief Donovan was silent for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was different, less official, more contemplative. "I've been working these mountains for 35 years. Grew up in the shadow of Whispering Ridge. My grandfather was one of the rescue workers during that mining disaster." He moved to the window, watching the storm that continued to pound the landscape. "There are stories about this place that go back generations. Stories about the mountain having its own consciousness, its own will." "You can't seriously believe that," Emma said. 20 years ago, I would have agreed with you," Donovan replied. "But I've seen too many things that defy explanation. Like a bear that scales an impossible cliff to retrieve a child's toy." He turned to face them again. The Niswa people who lived here for thousands of years before European settlers arrived believed Whispering Ridge was a nexus, a place where the barrier between worlds was thinner than elsewhere. Sophie had stopped whispering to Mr. Buttons and was now listening intently to the chief ranger's words. What your daughter says about Thomas Richardson's spirit being unable to rest, it aligns with local legends. The Niswa believed that souls of those who died suddenly or violently might become trapped if they had unfinished business. They conducted special ceremonies at burial to ensure the spirit could move on. He gestured toward the window, where lightning continued to illuminate the darkened sky in brilliant flashes. And they believed storms like this were signs of spirits trying to communicate. "This is absurd," Emma said, though her voice lacked conviction. "You're suggesting we should follow my 4-year-old daughter and her teddy bear to an abandoned mine during a thunderstorm because a ghost might be trapped there." Chief Donovan smiled gently. "When you put it that way, it does sound ridiculous. But let me ask you this. How do you explain what happened with Guardian today? A wild predator retrieving a child's toy from an impossible location and returning it gently to its owner?" Neither Oliver nor Emma had an answer. "The world is fuller and stranger than our modern minds like to admit," the chief continued. "Sometimes the most inexplicable events occur to those most open to receiving them, like children." During this conversation, none of the adults had noticed Sophie quietly making her way to the door. It wasn't until they heard the click of the latch that they realized she was attempting to leave. "Sophie!" Emma lunged forward, catching her daughter's arm just as she pulled the door open. "Where do you think you're going?" "To find Guardian," Sophie replied simply. "He's waiting to take us to the mine. The lost miner doesn't have much time left before he disappears forever." Chief Donovan studied the child with intense curiosity. "What do you mean, he doesn't have much time?" Sophie looked directly at the chief, her blue eyes solemn. "The old man, Mountain Walter, told me through Mr. Buttons. He says there's a special time every 70 years when lost souls can find their way home. But it only lasts for one day, and today is the last day before another 70 years. The chief's face paled visibly. "Today is June 12th, he said quietly, "the anniversary of the mining disaster." A heavy silence fell over the room, broken only by the continuing rumble of thunder outside. "This is crazy," Oliver finally said. "We can't seriously be considering taking our daughter to an abandoned mine during a thunderstorm based on—" "What?" "The word of a teddy bear allegedly communicating messages from a ghost." "Of course not," Emma agreed quickly, though something in her voice suggested she wasn't entirely convinced of her own words. Chief Donovan's radio crackled to life. "Chief, fire crew reports they can't get through on the main road. Fallen trees blocking access. The Eastern Ridge fire is spreading fast with this wind." "Understood," he responded. "Tell them to try the service road through Manzanita Valley. I'll meet them at the junction." He clicked off the radio and turned back to the Harrisons. "I need to go coordinate the fire response. Please stay here where it's safe. Whatever your daughter thinks she's being called to do, it's not worth risking your family's safety." After the chief left, Oliver secured the door to ensure Sophie couldn't slip out again. Emma led their daughter back to the sofa, where she sat with her arm around the child. "Honey, I know you believe what Mr. Buttons is telling you, but we can't go out in this storm. It's dangerous," she explained gently. Sophie looked up at her mother, tears pooling in her eyes. "But what about the lost miner? What about his family? They never knew what happened to him or where his special treasure is." "Special treasure?" Oliver inquired, sitting on Sophie's other side. Sophie nodded earnestly. "He found gold, Daddy, lots of gold. but he hid it because he wanted to surprise his family. Then the mine collapsed before he could tell anyone where it was. His wife and children were poor after he died because they never found his gold. How could you possibly know that? Emma whispered, a chill running down her spine despite the warmth of the room. Mr. Buttons knows, because Guardian knows, because the mountain knows, Sophie explained, with the simple logic of a child. Everything that happens on the mountain becomes part of its memory. The old man, Mountain Walter, can hear the mountain's memories, and now I can too. Oliver and Emma exchanged worried glances over their daughter's head. The storm continued to rage outside, and the sky had darkened further, though whether from the storm clouds or the approaching evening was hard to tell. I have an idea, Oliver said suddenly. Why don't we call Ranger Chen and ask her about this Thomas Richardson? Maybe there are historical records that could explain how Sophie knows these details. Emma nodded, relieved to have a rational course of action. Good thinking. There must be a logical explanation for all of this. But before Oliver could reach for the office phone, the lights flickered again and went out completely. This time, the emergency lights remained dark as well. Generator must have failed, Oliver muttered, fumbling for his phone to use as a flashlight. The soft blue glow illuminated their concerned faces. No signal, he reported after checking the screen. Storm must be interfering with the towers. A soft scratching sound at the window made them all turn. Sophie gasped, pointing excitedly, "Look, it's Guardian!" Sure enough, pressed against the glass was the massive face of the black bear they had encountered earlier. Its amber eyes seemed to glow in the darkness as it gazed steadily at Sophie. "Oh my God," Emma breathed, pulling Sophie back from the window. "How did it find us here?" "I told you, Mommy, he's been waiting for us," Sophie said matter-of-factly. "And now he's come to get us because we're running out of time." As if to emphasize her point, the bear raised one huge paw and placed it against the glass, not aggressively, but with deliberate purpose. Then it dropped back to all fours and moved away from the window, looking back once in what seemed like a clear invitation to follow. "This isn't happening," Emma whispered, clutching Sophie tightly. "It's just a coincidence. Wild animals sometimes approach buildings during storms seeking shelter." Oliver wasn't convinced. "Bears don't tap on windows like they're knocking on a door, Em, and they certainly don't make beckoning gestures." The bear returned to the window, this time standing up on its hind legs, a position that made its true size apparent. It must have stood over 7 feet tall. Again, it placed a paw against the glass, and this time it made a soft huffing sound that was audible even through the window. "He's getting impatient," Sophie said urgently. "We need to go now." "We are not following a wild bear anywhere," Emma stated firmly, though her voice trembled slightly. End of discussion. The bear dropped back to all fours and disappeared from view. For a moment, they thought it had given up and left. Then came the sound of heavy footsteps on the wooden porch outside the office, followed by a much louder, more insistent scratching at the door. Oliver moved protectively in front of Emma and Sophie. "Maybe we should call for help," he suggested, though he knew there was no way to do so with the power out and cell service down. "Guardian won't hurt us," Sophie insisted, trying to wiggle free from her mother's grasp. "He's trying to help." The scratching at the door intensified, accompanied now by a low, rumbling growl that seemed to vibrate through the floor beneath their feet. "Is there another way out of here?" Oliver asked frantically, looking around the office. "A back door?" Emma pointed to a second door in the rear corner of the room. "That might lead to a hallway. We could try to find another ranger." Just as they were about to make a move for the back exit, the scratching at the main door stopped abruptly. A moment of silence followed, then a tremendous crash, as something heavy slammed against the door. The wood splintered around the frame but held. Oliver grabbed Sophie, lifting her into his arms. "Run!" he shouted to Emma, heading for the back door. Emma was right behind him as they burst through into a dimly lit hallway, the only illumination coming from Oliver's phone. Behind them, another crash sounded as the bear made a second attempt to break through the office door. The wood groaned in protest but still didn't give. "Which way?" Emma gasped, looking down the long corridor that stretched in both directions. "There." Oliver pointed to an exit sign barely visible in the darkness. "That must lead outside." They ran toward it, the sound of splintering wood spurring them on as the bear made a third, more powerful assault on the office door. This time, they heard the crack of breaking timber and knew the door had finally given way. Sophie, bouncing in her father's arms as he ran, didn't seem frightened at all. Instead, she called out over his shoulder, "Guardian, we're over here. Follow us." "Sophie, be quiet," Emma hissed, terror evident in her voice. They reached the exit door and burst through it into the storm outside. Rain immediately drenched them as violent gusts of wind threatened to knock them off their feet. In the distance, an ominous orange glow illuminated the low-hanging clouds, the wildfire, growing despite the rain. "Where do we go?" Emma cried, struggling to be heard over the howling wind. Before Oliver could respond, a dark shape emerged from around the corner of the building. Guardian had circled around, perhaps sensing they would flee through another exit. The massive bear stood on all fours, rain plastering its thick fur to its powerful frame, making it look even more intimidating. The Harrisons froze, trapped between the building at their backs and the enormous predator before them. Guardian made no aggressive moves, however. Instead, it turned slightly, gesturing with its head toward the forest path that led away from the ranger station. "He wants us to follow him to the mine," Sophie said calmly. "We have to trust him, Mommy and Daddy. Please." Oliver and Emma shared a look of pure desperation. The situation defied all logic, all rational response. "What choice do we have?" Oliver finally said. "We can't go back inside. The power's out and we'd be trapped in the dark with a bear that can break down doors. At least, if we follow it, we're moving toward where the fire crews will be." Emma nodded reluctantly, rain streaming down her face and plastering her hair to her head. "Stay together," she said, "and at the first sign of danger from that bear, we run in different directions." Guardian seemed to understand they had reached a decision. The bear turned and began walking purposefully toward the forest trail, occasionally looking back to ensure they were following. And so, in the midst of one of the worst storms Whispering Ridge had seen in decades, the Harrison family found themselves following a wild bear into the dark forest, guided only by the intermittent flashes of lightning and the inexplicable certainty of their 4-year-old daughter that they were on a mission to help a spirit that had been trapped for 70 years. The trail quickly turned muddy under their feet, making progress difficult. Oliver continued to carry Sophie, while Emma stayed close behind, constantly scanning their surroundings for danger. Guardian moved ahead of them with the confident stride of a creature completely at home in the wilderness, occasionally pausing to ensure they were still following. "I can't believe we're doing this," Emma muttered, wiping rain from her eyes. "Following a bear through a forest during a thunderstorm." "If you have a better idea, I'm all ears," Oliver replied, adjusting Sophie in his arms. The little girl was surprisingly calm, clutching Mr. Buttons tightly against her chest and occasionally whispering to the teddy bear as if receiving instructions. The forest grew denser around them, the ancient pines creaking ominously in the powerful wind. Lightning continued to illuminate their path in brief, disorienting flashes. During one such flash, Emma caught sight of something that made her grab Oliver's arm. "Look," she gasped, pointing to a figure standing among the trees about 30 yards ahead. The silhouette of an old man was briefly visible, his beard and long hair whipping in the wind. He appeared to be wearing old-fashioned clothing and leaned on a carved walking stick. As darkness returned, he seemed to vanish. "Did you see that?" Emma's voice was barely audible over the storm. Oliver nodded grimly. "Mountain Walter, I presume?" When the next lightning flash came, the figure was gone. Guardian, however, had altered course slightly, heading in the direction where the old man had appeared. The bear's pace increased, forcing the Harrisons to struggle to keep up. "Daddy," Sophie said suddenly, her small voice close to Oliver's ear. "Mr. Buttons says we need to hurry. The fire is getting closer to the special place, and if it burns, the lost miner will never be found." As if confirming her words, the orange glow in the sky had grown brighter and seemed to be expanding. The smell of smoke now mingled with the petrichor of the storm, an alarming combination. They had been hiking for about 20 minutes when Guardian came to an abrupt halt. Ahead, the trail forked. One path continued upward, deeper into the forest. The other descended toward what appeared to be an overgrown clearing. The bear took the descending path without hesitation. As they followed, Oliver began to make out shapes in the clearing below, the weathered remains of structures, partially reclaimed by nature. As they drew closer, they realized they were looking at the abandoned mining operation. Collapsed wooden buildings stood like skeletal remains against the storm-darkened sky. A large opening in the hillside marked the mine entrance, partially blocked by fallen timber and decades of erosion. Guardian stopped at the edge of the clearing, turning to look at the Harrisons expectantly. "He wants us to go to the mine entrance," Sophie explained, pointing. "The lost miner is inside, through the first big room and down the left tunnel." "Absolutely not," Emma stated firmly. "That mine has been abandoned for 70 years. It's structurally unsound and could collapse at any moment, especially during a storm like this." "Not to mention the approaching wildfire," Oliver added. "We need to find the fire crew and get to safety." Sophie struggled to be put down. Once on her feet, she looked up at her parents with an expression far too serious for her young face. "If we don't help the lost miner today, he'll be trapped forever," she said solemnly. "And the special treasure he found for his family will never be discovered." Guardian made a low huffing sound, then did something extraordinary. The bear moved to a pile of debris near the mine entrance and began clearing it away with powerful swipes of its paws. Rotted timbers and rocks were tossed aside as if they weighed nothing. "It's clearing a path," Oliver whispered in disbelief. "It's actually clearing a path into the mine." A particularly violent gust of wind nearly knocked Emma off her feet. As she struggled to regain her balance, a flash of lightning illuminated the clearing. In that brief moment of visibility, she saw it again. The figure of the old man, this time standing directly beside the mine entrance, pointing inside with his walking stick. When darkness returned, he was gone. "This is insane," she muttered, yet found herself moving forward, drawn by some force she couldn't name. Guardian had cleared a space large enough for them to enter the mine. The bear stood aside, watching them with those intelligent amber eyes. Oliver pulled out his phone, using its flashlight to examine the entrance. "It looks like the main support beams are still intact, at least in this section," he observed. "But there's no telling how stable it is further in." Sophie tugged at his hand. "We have to hurry, Daddy. Guardian will show us the way." As if in response, the bear brushed past them and entered the mine. Its massive form was quickly swallowed by the darkness beyond the reach of Oliver's phone light. Are we really considering this? Emma asked, her voice strained. Another tremendous crash of thunder shook the ground beneath their feet. In the momentary silence that followed, they heard a new sound, the distinct crackle of approaching flames. The wildfire was moving faster than expected, driven by the powerful wind. I think our options just narrowed, Oliver said grimly. The fire is coming this way. At least the mine might offer some protection. Hand in hand, the Harrison family stepped into the darkness of the Whispering Ridge mine, following the bear that had already shown itself capable of impossible feats. Behind them, the storm continued to rage, while ahead, only mystery awaited, and perhaps the restless spirit of Thomas Richardson, the miner who had never made it home.